Welcome to Off the Book,
Beyond Fiction,
the brand new groundbreaking radio event where fact becomes freedom
and fiction goes beyond fact.
I am Dee-Dee Morgan.
And I am Freddie Bones. Before we move on to some of our literary discussions
and juicy debates,
remember you can contact us on Twitter at off_the-book or at Gmail to offthebook.bf@gmail.com.
or you can always visit our blog, our new blog. This is our new website, right, Freddie?
Yes, it is new and it is full of juicy material.
Yes. You can contact us at Blogspot, and the address is the following: off-thebook.blogspot.com, and everything goes in lowercase.
Yes, of course, and there you will find many tabs where you can find different material. The last show, which we will discuss in a minute, and you can also find articles of our respective blogs.
Right, because we have also, we should tell our audience that we have included the address for our own blogs, our personal blogs. And there's also an article that I very much liked, and which is, and that you wrote yourself. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, it's an article telling the story behind the first edition of the show. How I felt while recording it, the experiences leading up to it, and how it made me feel afterwards. And it's written in a comic kind of way.
Yes, it's got lots of humor and irony. More humor than irony, and it's written in formal style. So I think it's very appealing. I read it and I didn't know really what I was going to read about, because although you wrote it about our program, I think that you poured out yourself in a very nice way. Okay. What are we going to discuss in this edition?
Well, in this edition we are going to discuss a fantastic writer I love, and he's astounding Oscar Wilde.
We haven't got a particular reason why we've chosen this author. However, it is part of our season one of Off the Book, Beyond Fiction, and it's our second edition, right? What did we do? We should tell our audience what we did on our last edition. We talked about Jane Austen.
Yes, we talked about Jane Austen, which is also included in what we selected as select British authors, and we are going, in this first season, we are going to deal mainly with English authors. And now we have chosen Oscar Wilde, who is not English, but anyway, his career developed mainly in England, and that's why we have chosen him, and also because he has a fantastic humorous spirit, which I like a lot, really.
I love him too, and I think he is very dear to our audience of translators, for our colleagues and teachers, and I think the whole audience will enjoy it. Okay, now we'll start with some bio details. Oscar Wilde was born on October the 16th in 1853 in Dublin, Ireland. He lived in the Victorian England, that is, in the late 19th century. His first and only novel was The Picture of Dorian Gray. His first play was Lady Windermere's Fan, which was on stage in February in 1892. Then he met Lord Alfred Bosie Douglas, son of the Marquis of Queensberry, and he had to 2 years of hard labor because he was imprisoned, during which time he wrote the Ballad of Readingale. I think that we should mention also that he had quite an interesting family background, right? What do you know about his mother?
Well, his mother was really picturesque as well. Really like Oscar Wilde, she was really kind of a revolutionary woman as well. She was a poet as well, and she wrote a lot of feminist works. And some people describe her as a walking museum, because she was really decorated herself with lots of earrings and necklaces and stuff like that. And she was really a picturesque woman. And in a movie I watched preparing the show, she's really portrayed in a fantastic way by Vanessa Redgrave.
Yes, you mean the movie called Wilde?
Yes, it's from 1997, and Vanessa Redgrave is really comic. I found her really comic portraying Lady Wilde.
I think she doesn't have a major part in the film, even though she is the mother of the protagonist, that is Oscar Wilde, who is depicted by Stephen Fry. But however, her performance is, I like her performance. She surprised me a lot, because one is usually used to Vanessa Redgrave acting in different roles, and for example in other movies like Mrs. Dalloway, I remember, and to see her acting in such a carefree manner as she did, carefree way, was like a little astonishing, but I liked it.
And rather shocking as well, but I loved her in that role. I mean, she's always fantastic, of course, and what I found interesting is that it is such a different role to what she usually portrays.
You know, I find this soundtrack, this track that we're listening to, which is part of the soundtrack of the movie Wilde, very deep. I think it's lovely. It's somewhat nostalgic at the beginning. The music, I mean, it's by Debbie Wiseman, and I think I don't know, it fills me with a wistful sense of what Wilde's life was like.
Yes, I think it really shows that even beyond that comic and outgoing character that Wilde had, he was really a deep man, and that's what I like about this track. It's really deep and rather sad, I have to say. Yes.
It's a little sad, but somehow it's full of joy as well, and of a sense of hope. I think that's the paradox that Wilde himself embodied in a way. Okay, he once said that one should either become a work of art or wear a work of art. He was very deeply involved in art in itself. I think he got some of his school prizes were mainly on art. Apart from the rest of the subjects, he excelled in art. But somehow he wanted to write. I mean, I think that he thought literature was his first art, right?
Yes. Another important thing is that he considered art. He did art. He performed art for the sake of art itself. He was a defender and of beauty as well. He thought of art as a beautiful thing, and that's it. I mean, that was the sake of art for himself, just to portray beauty and to express beauty.
We will later discuss this, but the theme of beauty is also depicted in the picture of Dorian Gray. I think it's the main topic, the main theme of this novel, which is in fact the only one he wrote. Do we have a clue? I mean, why he wrote only one novel and then he kept writing for the stage, but not any more novels?
In fact, it is quite astounding, because the greatest writers really excelled in novels. Indeed, Jane Austen, like we dealt with the last edition, was a novelist, and she didn't write, for example, drama. She was not a playwright. But Oscar Wilde was excelled in plays mainly, and short stories as well. But I think that the best works of Oscar Wilde are the plays he wrote. But I really don't know why he didn't write a novel, only one novel.
I think you know that after he wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray, he perhaps, this is my own conjecture, perhaps he thought that there was nothing else he should write or should include or had to write to include in a novel. I think that in the novel there are lots of instances, hundreds of instances in which you can read the narrator, that is speaking himself, then you can read Oscar Wilde through the lines of the characters. I mean, he kind of preaches his own philosophy all throughout this work. So, I mean, if I were Oscar Wilde, I really wouldn't know what else to include in a novel. The rest I would save it for the plays.
Besides, do you know in which year it was written?
I don't quite remember.
Yes, but maybe if he wrote it towards the end of his life, we know that, I think, correct me if I am wrong, the Picture of Dorian Gray was used to as a proof to imprison him.
Yes, it was used against him during his legal trials, and I get it here. It was published in 1890 in an American magazine, and because of its implied homoerotic theme, it played a great part in the legal trials against him, which later came to imprison him, which is really sad and perhaps unfair.
I think it is totally unfair because, I mean, he was imprisoned on a private matter which has nothing to do with public life, and it didn't affect anyone, I think, more than himself and Bosie.
Well, the charges were precisely that it did affect public life and society and English. Yes, I know, but it has to do with not in fact, but it has to do with public opinion and common sense and the society of the times. I think we are looking at it from a different perspective now. In the 21st century, the year 2012, perhaps it seems unfair to us. I think it was, of course, but for the law of the time in England, I suppose it was the right thing to do.
Yes, of course it was, and I was thinking about that exactly. We are looking at it from a totally different perspective, and now, thankfully, we have a totally different perspective, which makes us realize how unfair this treatment was to him, and to Bosie as well.
Yes, we are forgetting all about Bosie. He played a very important part in Oscar Wilde's life. We are moving now to define what paradox is, because paradox in itself stood for perhaps his best strategy as a writer, as a speaker as well, because Oscar Wilde was a master of eloquence, right? And so Freddie will now define paradox in his way and from some sources we have researched.
Yes, well, as you said before, he was an excellent master of paradox, and the astounding thing, I like it a lot, is that he spoke the way he wrote as well. I mean, he used paradox while speaking.
That's not easy for a
That's
writer.
not easy. I mean, it makes you think a lot when you're listening to someone speaking that way. And he used a paradox after paradox after paradox after paradox, and it was, oh my god, it's tiring. But
he puzzled people. He shocked his audience.
yes, he did. Well, so paradox is an apparently true statement that leads to a contradiction or a situation which defies intuition and logic.
I like this definition because it actually defies. Paradox has the power and the effect, I think, of defying common sense, logic, public opinion, I don't know, social prejudices as well. He stated the greatest truths about the world, not just about society or English society, throughout paradox, right?
Yes, and what I like about paradox is that it is humorous as well, because maybe when you listen to a person, speaking this way, you find it appealing and you like what he says. If he is cruel to you and blunt, maybe you won't accept his ideas.
But sometimes Oscar Wilde was cruel in his paradoxes.
He was, but in a comic way, and that's what I like, because if you listen to it in a comic way, maybe you will accept it. If it is said downright and blunt,
that's true. But sometimes I feel, I mean, this is a feeling I get from his own writing, that these paradoxes he wrote kind of leave me with a bittersweet, I don't know, sense of things, of reality, of the world, of religion, of many things, right?
Yes, it is really. You are left with this paradoxical feeling when you listen to them.
Right.
Well, now I would like to compare it with Arnie, which is also a literary device very common in English authors. In Jane Austen, we remember. Well, Arnie is a literary or rhetorical device in which there is a gap or incongruity between what a speaker or a writer says and what is generally understood. So, maybe Arnie takes into account the context, while paradox is more structural and it is found at the level of what you listen, and you don't need, at least, to take into account the situation in which the speaker or the writer is using it.
Yes, and just to finish with our first section of the second edition of our first season, I have here another definition of paradox, which I like very much. I think it's really, really simple, and it's from the Macmillan Dictionary, from its website, in fact, macmillandictionary.com, and it reads like this: paradox, a statement consisting of two parts that seem to mean the opposite of each other, or the use of this kind of statement in writing. I think that it's interesting to notice that here they define it in the Macmillan Dictionary as consisting of two parts. It's like a balanced statement or group of statements, I don't know. And I think like the last one has the effect of twisting somehow the first one.
And you find it quite shocking when you read it or listen to it, and it has that world-changing power, which I love. A paradox, because you come with something you don't expect to find.
Right. It's unexpected. The end is unexpected usually.
Yes, and I love paradox, even if I think I'm not quite excellent at using paradox. That's why I love Oscar Wilde, because he was such a genius.
You admire him a lot,
a lot, yes.
Me too, of course.
Well, and he's English, so that's the top of it all.
Okay, now we're going for a break, and we're going to listen to some of the, well, just one of the tracks of the front titles, I think, from the film The Importance of Being Earnest, starring, among other important actors, Rupert Everett, Reese Witherspoon, Colin Firth, who else, Freddie?
Judi Dench and Francis O'Connor.
And I really recommend the film, because although there are lots of plays and everything based on the importance of being earnest, I think the film is really hilarious. And you know, I didn't quite trust Reese Witherspoon would be okay for her role, but I think she does it alright. Yeah, I think the part suits her.
Well, now we are listening to the track, and we leave you with this track, and then we are coming back with more discussions and debates.
Stay hooked. Welcome back to Off the Book, Beyond Fiction. We are back now and we are dealing with Oscar Wilde. This is the second edition of our first season on selected English classics.
Yes, we are now listening to the vital importance of being earnest, and this is also part of the movie The Importance of Being Earnest, and it's also a fabulous track. I like it a lot. It's really comic, isn't it?
Yes,
it's really funny.
Jazz and it's very modern, right?
Yes, it's modern in spirit. Yes, I like it. I like it.
And it's very Oscar Wilde-like, I think. Okay, now we are going to deal with some of our personal questions, right? These are questions that we are going to make to each other. And we are going to answer them spontaneously, right? Freddie, I would like to ask you, what was the first story you ever read by Oscar Wilde, and if this is your favorite story or your favorite work by him nowadays?
Well, the first story I read, if I don't remember wrong, was The Happy Prince. I read it in Spanish, of course, because I read it at school, and I really liked the story, and it is one of my favorite stories nowadays, but it's not my favorite story by Oscar Wilde. The one I like the most nowadays is his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and even though it is quite dark and rather depressing and perverse in some ways, I find it fantastic. I can't really imagine how Oscar Wilde came to think about a story like that, and that's what I like the most about the story. But I also like The Happy Prince, and I remember that when I read it at school in Spanish, I didn't notice something that I did notice when I read it in English. Which is the love relationship between the Happy Prince and the Swallow. And I noticed that Oscar Wilde he showed some kind of a gay love relationship between them, because he applies the male article to the Swallow and to the Prince, and he's implying at least a gay relationship, and I hadn't noticed that in the Spanish version, and I think that's something, as a translator, I think it's important to reflect that, because the homoerotic themes are important in Oscar Wilde.
Yes, and as you just said, they are not usually explicit but rather implicit, so you have to read between the lines. However, since they are short stories and these are stories for children's stories mainly, perhaps a child may not be actually noticing all these features, and he may or she may still enjoy it anyway, right?
Yes, of course. But what I particularly like about his short stories is that even if they are written for children, they have topics and themes and some things which are not really childlike. They are really adult. Some things which are, as I said before, implied. Do you think I am right?
Yes, and besides, I think I've read the first short stories by Oscar Wilde when I was around 18 years old, or 17, between 17 and 18 years old. I mean, I was in my late teenage. Now I am 22 years old, and I still like them. And I've been reading a lot on different websites and blogs and stuff like that. Lots of people, I really mean this, have read The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde as their first Oscar Wilde work, right? This was the first experience with Oscar Wilde. Even some actors that have been part of the casts of different film film realizations declare this to be their first experience with Oscar Wilde. So I think The Happy Prince is like a super classic in literature for many people from different parts of the world.
Yes. Now I'm going to ask you a personal question, which I would really like you to answer, and I don't think it's really difficult to answer, but well, let's see. Do you think the relationship between Oscar and Bosie was reflected in any of his works?
Okay. I will try to be as brief as possible,
Yes.
because we're running out of time and we have just done our first section. I think that it's implied, again, not explicitly reflected in the picture of Dorian Gray. And this is the opinion of many people, not just myself, many critics and reviewers and sometimes even actors and film directors. They somehow interpret the relationship between Dorian Gray and Lord Henry Wotton, which is the other protagonist of Dorian Gray, as being kind of a homosexual relationship. However, there is no sex between them, and there is no sex either relationship between Basil, who is another main character, right, the painter of the picture of Dorian Gray, and Dorian Gray. This is not portrayed in the same way in the film, which we will later discuss. The film, I mean the latest film realization in which was done in 2009. Perhaps, yes, of course. I think that Dorian Gray Oscar Wilde, did get a lot of inspiration from his bond with Bosie and with his other lovers, because of course he had other lovers. But I don't think he meant to be truly faithful to life facts. To his own life facts related with Bosie in the picture of Dorian Gray. I don't think so. I think that as a writer, he drew inspiration from everything and everyone, whatever and whoever came across in his life, and I think that is absolutely legal and
Yes.
and loyal and it's okay.
And in fact, in the movie Wilde, in a part, there is a scene where Bosie says to him that says to Oscar that he only likes Bosie because of his title and because he is a potential character, let's say, because he has the necessary characteristics which Oscar Wilde portrayed in his plays and in his works in general.
Such as beauty. I forgot to say that beauty, yes, is its main theme in the picture of Dorian Gray. Timeless beauty, right? Beauty forever, young, being young forever. It's a very perverse novel. And just a while ago, you said like something like you can't imagine how come he could ever imagine such or create such a story. I myself can't imagine how he ever dared sit and write such a story, how he could bear the writing, the routine of sitting to write such a thing, because it's so full of culture, by the way. Oscar Wilde was quite proficient in ancient Greek studies and Roman studies and Latin, and he knew a lot about that, and somehow he compiles everything he knows and I mean from his studies and his experience into this piece, the picture of Dorian Gray. Sorry, I haven't been brief at all.
Well, but I think it's relevant and it's a quite good discussion. I mean, Oscar Wilde is such a classic author and so popular everywhere that he needs time. So I'm sorry. We are sorry if we extend too much on the time, but I think he deserves this.
Yes, not that Jane Austen shouldn't, or that the writers we are going to discuss later shouldn't get as much time, but somehow, I don't know, perhaps I think that we are rediscovering Oscar Wilde. I mean, to create this edition of the book, we have been reading a lot again, and a lot of it came to us like new stuff, because there were lots of things we hadn't read, and obviously we haven't read everything he wrote in order to do this program, which will last only 1 hour. But I mean, we're full of paradoxes now that we have been reading Oscar Wilde for so long.
Yes. What do you think of going to a break now, and we are going to listen to some other track?
Yes, and perhaps we should like to finish this section with a quote by Oscar Wilde from some of his works, or something of the sort.
Well, yes, I have a quote here that comes from one of his short stories, which is The Remarkable Rocket, and it reads like this. Yes.
I love it.
Yes. I dare say that if I knew him, I should not be his friend at all. It is a very dangerous thing to know one's friends.
I totally agree, and you are my friend.
What was I saying?
You were talking about yourself.
Of course, I knew I was discussing some interesting subject when I was so rudely interrupted.
Okay, Freddie, would you mind telling us where is this dialogue from?
Well, this dialogue comes from the fantastic short story The Remarkable Rocket once more. I love this story. It's full of paradoxes, it's full of humor, it's full of criticism to the society, to the politicians as well. Oscar Wilde in this story criticized politicians, as I said before, even if it is for children. You have to read between lines and you will find many things which will make you laugh a lot.
Yes, and I think from what I can recall, that it deals with selfishness and such a big ego this rocket had, right?
Yes. In fact, Oscar Wilde dealt with the vices of the human nature, and this story in particular is a display of this. It shows selfishness at its best.
Okay, now we would like to move on to some brief literary discussions, as we promised at the beginning of the presentation of our program. Freddie will try to, let's say, summarize a relationship he found, which is quite groundbreaking, if you ask me, and it has to do with an American TV series, right? Which is called American Horror Story, and he will relate it to some of Oscar Wilde's works, I think, right?
Yes, this series by FX is called American Horror Story, as you said before, and well, in this series, a family moves to a new house after the couple have had a sentimental problem. The man has cheated on his wife, and they they change houses so as to try to solve the matrimonial problems, let's say. And well, that's basically what the story is about. And when they buy the house they buy, there is a lady telling them that the people who lived in the house the previous year and some years before have died in a violent way. So this is the first similarity I found between the series and the Canterville Ghost, which is a short story by Oscar Wilde. In the short story, the people who sell the house to the Otis family, which is American, has to tell them by contract that there is a ghost in the house. So there is this similarity, which in the series and in the story, the sellers are obliged by contract to tell the buyers that the house has problems, has supernatural problems. This is the first similarity. Then then there is another similarity, which is quite trivial, I think, but I found it, and I would like to mention it, that there is the housekeeper who has been there for a very long time, and she really asks the new owners of the house, to stay there because she knows the house, she knows how the house works, and she knows her job as well very well. And well, they do keep the housekeeper, both families, the Otis and the Harmons, which are the family from American Horror Story. And then there is another similarity, which is the deepest and the strongest bonds between both, I think. In the story and in the series, there is a ghost which develops a kind of a romantic relationship with the daughter of the families. And also in both stories, the ghost needs the girl to help him rest in peace. In the story by Oscar Wilde, the ghost is downright and asks her to help him rest in peace, while in the series she doesn't know. She thinks the boy, maybe I'm going to spoil the story now, but
no, it doesn't. I mean, we're just discussing, so it's okay.
In the series, there is a medium telling the girl that the ghost wants her to help him rest in peace, because she doesn't know he is a ghost. He presents himself as a patient of a father who is a psychiatrist, and he goes to a house as a patient, and she doesn't know the boy is a ghost until a medium tells her that he is in fact a ghost. And well, I'm not going to tell now what the girls do. In the story by Oscar Wilde, she helps the ghost, while in American Horror Story, Violet, which is the name of the girl, does quite a different thing, but I'm not going to spoil what she does. If you want, watch the series. I strongly recommend it. I like it a lot, and it is fantastic. I like it a lot.
So you have finished watching the series?
No, I haven't, but the episode which shows this medium telling Violet that the ghost needs her help to rest in peace is a particular one. I have watched it, and well, in that episode also the girl does something quite stupid, if you ask me. But well, it's a reaction, a spontaneous reaction, so I can't blame her at all.
How did you feel when you first bumped into these similarities between these two works? I mean, considering that one is a TV series and it's set, I think, in contemporary world, while you're comparing it with the Canterville Ghost. I mean, it sound at first sight it would sound like an utterly crazy idea to even think that these two works could be at all related. How did you feel when you made this kind of discovery, which is, I think, a discovery?
Well, let me tell you that when I watched the series at first sight, I didn't recall the similarity at all, because I had read it a very long time ago. But when I read the story again to prepare this story for the show, for today's show, I linked both stories, and I really think that they must be connected in some way on purpose, because I mean, both of them are ghost stories, and besides, the creator of the series is I am sure he must have read Oscar Wilde. First of all, because Oscar Wilde is a must, and second, because he is also gay. And I think that most gays feel identified in some way or other with
Yes.
Oscar Wilde.
He's a source of inspiration for everyone, of course, but I think he must be a source of inspiration and courage and bravery to all those who have the same sexual inclinations, let's say, as Oscar Wilde.
Yes, in fact, I've been researching and I didn't find that the creators said that this was an inspiration for the series. But anyway, I think they, even if not intentionally, it may be a link.
Yes, and besides culture and literature and fiction in general and the cinema, it all works like that because everyone influences everyone else. And besides, the portrait of Dorian Gray is about influencing and how the personality of someone to whom you feel so attracted can influence you either for the better or else for worse.
Yes.
Yes, because well, now I will move on to more or less describe the plot of this piece. In the picture of Dorian Gray, there is a painter called Basil Howard, and he has found, let's say, his true source of inspiration. He's mad about Dorian Gray. Dorian Gray is a young lad, as Oscar Wilde describes him. He's very naive, quite inoffensive and innocent at the beginning, and he poses for Basil. And Basil, he paints his portrait. And Basil has another friend, who is Lord Henry Wharton, who belongs to a very high rank in terms of English society, and Lord Henry Wharton kind of stands for paradox in itself, and he's the one who will somehow, as a character, influence Dorian Gray, and he will end up influencing Dorian Gray for the worse, because Dorian Gray is a kind of empty box that has who's very young and who's just blooming, and he's so young that he will be that his brain will be somehow washed by the philosophy, let's say, that is going to be always talked about all the time by Lord Henry.
Yes, and besides, these kind of relationships between elderly men and young boys, like Dorian Gray, were really common between artists in the time of Oscar Wilde. He is an example with Bosie, but there were many others who developed this kind of relationship: an elderly man with a younger boy, a teen in his 15 years old, or nearly 16, 17, though about those ages.
Yes, and when it came to light in real life, I mean, you're relating it to Oscar Wilde's real life with Bosie. It kind of produced a scandal, but a social scandal, I mean. But I suppose that homosexuality has been going on in history all the time. It's just a matter of, I mean, of letting other people be, I think. But we're going into another topic, and we are supposed to discuss Oscar Wilde's work. There is a phrase that is constantly present in the lines spoken by Colin Firth, who actually personifies Lord Henry Wharton in the latest film that actually stars Colin Firth. And this is the phrase. It reads, "What matter what the cost was? One could never pay too high a price for any sensation." And this is the kind of one of the slogans that are constantly being publicized and advertised by Lord Henry, and that Dorian Gray will take for granted. It's like Dorian Gray takes everything Lord Henry utters as a kind of must, as the real philosophy of life. Yes, as a rule, right?
Yes.
And that's what ends up destroying him and his soul. And I think, and with this I'm going to finish, I think that if there is one thing you can conclude, I think, from the picture of Dorian Gray. I mean, the writing, the piece of writing, is that you have to be careful with what you wish, because in the story, there's this one of the first scenes in which Basil is painting the picture of Dorian Gray, and Lord Henry kind of bumps into the conversation. And as he starts talking, that's the moment when Dorian Gray kind of falls in love with Lord Henry's speech. At a point, Lord Henry asks, how? I mean, no, I think he asks, what would you do, or how much would you pay to have all the youth that your painting now has, so that you never grow old? Because somehow Lord Henry makes Dorian Gray realize that the picture will endure, but that his youth as a human being, due to the passing of time, will not. Right? And so Dorian Gray becomes kind of obsessed with the idea of beauty and timeless beauty and youth and everything. And so he says, "Oh, I would do anything." And Lord Henry kind of challenges him, but he's speaking in jest. He never thinks, I think, that it will become real, right? And then it ends up being real. The picture starts aging, but not the real Dorian Gray. It's a curse.
Yes, and I think that Lord Henry is rather cynical as well, because there is a scene in the movie when Dorian tells Lord Henry, "I am always you, always preached, but never dared practice," or something like that. "I'm everything you always preached, but never dared practice." And that's what I think about Lord Henry. He's all about jesting and being joyful and merry all the time, and not caring about anything too much. But he's quite a coward, I think, as well.
Yes, we are kind of interpreting the psychology of the characters. We cannot help it. We are human beings. And we are very fond of fiction, even of going beyond fiction. And now, to just end this almost final section of our edition, we are going to read an extract from the picture of Dorian Gray, which is somehow echoed in the film, and which I think is very witty. This is an excerpt of a dialogue between the Duchess of Monmouth and Lord Henry. "I believe in the race.
It represents the survival of the poshing.
It has development.
Decay fascinates me more.
What of art?
It is a malady.
Love?
An illusion.
Religion?
The fashionable substitute for belief.
You are a skeptic."
Never! Skepticism is the beginning of faith.
What are you?
To define is to limit.
Give me a clue.
Thread snap. You would lose your way in the labyrinth.
You bewildered me. Let us talk of someone else.
You are a very irritating person, and very ill-bred. I hate people who talk about themselves as you do, when one wants to talk about oneself as I do. It is what I call selfishness, and selfishness is the most detestable thing, especially to anyone of my temperament, for I am well known for my sympathetic nature. In fact, you should take an example by me. You could not possibly have a better model. Now that you have the chance, you had better avail yourself of it, for I am going back to court almost immediately. I am a great favourite at court. In fact, the prince and princess were married yesterday in my honour. Of course, you know nothing of these matters, for you are a provincial.
What odd chaps you painters are! You do anything in the world to gain a reputation. As soon as you have one, you seem to want to throw it away. It is silly of you, for there is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about.
Now we are back with this section of the book. I've been reading a quote from the remarkable Rocket, and I find it really, once again, paradoxical and funny. And well, and where was your quote from?
And my quote here was from Dorian Gray again. It's I think it's within the first chapter, yes, of the picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And of course we were listening to the soundtrack of the movie.
The importance of being earnest. Well, now we are going to move into some fun facts about Oscar Wilde. We are going to ask some questions to each other. I would like to ask you, because as we know, Oscar Wilde died a Catholic. So I would like to ask you whether you think this was really consistent with his previous life. He was, we know, a practicing homosexual, and we know that the Catholic Church punishes practicing homosexuals. So what do you think about this? I have my personal opinion on this, but I would like to know yours.
Okay, in the movie Wilde, Oscar Wilde, and here I'm quoting, says, "I do believe in anything, provided it is incredible. That's why I intend to die a Catholic, though I never could live as one." Again, we have a kind of paradox, right? At first, when I heard that he had converted prior to his death, I thought he was only doing it on purpose, almost as though he meant to create the paradox of his final days. I mean, what else could he have done? And he had already been ruined by his years in prison. He had almost no friends to turn to, no stable financial status. He died in Paris. His late days came to him during a very severe meningitis, and I think the first thought that came to my head was, oh, this is so Oscar Wilde-like. But then perhaps I should think that we could give him the benefit of doubt and think that he cared for his sins just as every Catholic does, and I do myself, and perhaps he did convert out of an honest wish to become a Catholic. So we will never know, I think, right? It's not as if he had left any written document or evidence or anything like that that would suggest either one theory or the other, even though we have this line that is quoted from, I think, one of his works, and that could suggest that he was perhaps doing it in jest. But you know, you should always be suspicious, I think, of Oscar Wilde, because everything he says in jest has a note of reality, of wisdom, wit, and truth.
Yes, that's basically what I think as well. I mean, you may think that it was done just to be talked about, and as to show that his life was also a paradox. But as you said, we will never know what he really meant when he became a Catholic in his latest days.
In November 2011, Oscar Wilde's tomb in Paris was restored after it had become blighted by lipstick smears left by thousands of kisses. And here I am quoting a source from The Guardian, dated on November the 30th in 2011. Some fans, Fred, view this as a negative reaction by the Paris cemetery authorities, but others, such as actor Rupert Everett, seem to think it necessary. What do you think of the protective barrier that was erected to protect Wilde's tomb from his fans' kisses?
Well, I quite agree with Rupert Everett. I think that it's a question of respecting the dead person. One would not go through life kissing tombs, I think. And besides, or rather, not besides, the fact that it is Oscar Wilde who is dead there and lying in that tomb does not take away his condition of being a human being and having to be respected. Even if he was a kind of a celebrity, I think it's disrespectful to go there and just paint your lips with lipstick and just kiss at the tomb. I don't think it's respectful. I mean, one would not go to a cemetery and just celebrate Oscar Wilde, let's say. A cemetery is a place to, remember the dead people and just have a good memory of them.
In peace.
Yes, and let them, of course.
Well, there are many people who would argue with you. Lots of people, lots of fans, boys and girls, and regardless of religion and homosexual inclinations or anything. Well, I think we should kind of end our discussion here because we have perhaps another quote to read from the remarkable rocket.
Well,
and of course also one from the picture of Dorian Gray. While Fred looks for his, I will read mine. It reads, when I like people immensely, I never tell their names to anyone. This is said by Basil to Lord Henry because Basil somehow predicts that Lord Henry will very much like and attract Dorian Gray. And you know, I truly identify with this. I never reveal the true name of the guy I fancy, for example, to a friend. Even if it's my best friend, I don't usually tell the name.
Well, it's a good thing to do, I think.
It's a safe thing to do.
Of course.
At least.
Well, and this quote is also from the remarkable Rockets, and it goes like this: "The king's garden is not the world, you foolish squib," said a big Roman candle. "The world is an enormous place, and it will take you 3 days to see it thoroughly."
I love it because it's so childish,
Yes.
right?
The Roman candle has kind of a childish attitude. Of course, the world would not take only 3 days to visit thoroughly, but many more days. But that's precisely the fun thing about this quote, I think.
And we are sorry to tell you, dear audience, that we are now coming to the end of this second edition of our first season of Off the Book. However, we would like to play for our last minutes of program the final part of the first part of the interview, in which Stephen Fry talks about his character and Oscar Wilde, right?
Yes, this part we are going to play is featured in the movie Wilde, which we have been quoting all along. And well, Oscar Wilde in this part talks about himself, and it is quite revealing and quite identifies Wilde.
Okay, let's play it and stay booked.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have enjoyed this evening immensely. The actors have given us a charming rendering of a delightful play, and your appreciation has been most intelligent. I congratulate you on the great success of your performance, which persuades me that you think almost as highly of this play as I do myself.
Oscar and Bosie.
And now we are going to say goodbye to our audience. This is our monthly program of the book Beyond Fiction. What are we going to deal with in our upcoming edition, Fred?
In the third edition, we are going to deal with the Bronte sisters, whom I also like. I don't really love them, but I like them quite a lot.
I don't love them either, but I like in particular Agnes Grey, which was written by Bronte.
Yes, well, we are going to make connections among the works of the three of them, and well, we hope you have enjoyed this edition, and we tell you to stay booked, and we hope you comment us on Twitter at offler-the-book. You can also send emails to offthebook.bf@gmail.com,
or you can visit our blog at off-thebook.blogspot.com, and of course every review or comment is welcome.